It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Christopher Dickey, foreign editor, joins us. How are you?
Good, tired, been a busy week.
It's been a busy week. It's not over yet.
No.
All right. Also with us, Mark Dean, journalist at Bloomberg News, who's been watching events on both sides of the channel this week.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. Nice to welcome back Matthew Dalton, reporter for the Wall Street Journal.
Hey.
And France24.com's Leila Jacinto coming down from the second floor newsroom to grace us with her presence. How are you?
Good.
The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag World This Week, when Theresa May declared a surprise snap election 6 weeks ago, it looked like it would be a walk in the park. Well, it ended up, as usual, with a drive to Buckingham Palace, but the UK Prime Minister, who's lost her outright Conservative majority in Parliament, edging Labour by only 2 points in the popular vote, and who's trying to keep calm and carry on ahead of what may or may not be her last weekend as Prime Minister.
What the country needs more than ever is certainty. And having secured the largest number of votes and the greatest number of seats in the general election, it is clear that only the Conservative and Unionist Party has the legitimacy and ability to provide that certainty by commanding a majority in the House of Commons.
Mark Dean, a surprising speech after Buckingham Palace. No acknowledgement of the setback that she just suffered.
It is a little bit surprising, but you know, you have to put a good face on it, keep calm and carry on, as they say. I think that the situation politically is very precarious now. It could go on quite a long time. We just don't know. I don't think you can presume that that May will be out of there anytime soon. She could be, but there doesn't seem to be any challenge really being mounted against her from within the Conservative Party, that suggests for the immediate future things will carry on.
What was it about her campaign that flopped?
I really think that one of the things that clearly doesn't work anymore, especially with young voters, is authenticity. So this packaged, robotic, political spiel just doesn't go down well, and there's no sincerity in it, and especially young people will not stand for that these days.
Young people who this time turned out to vote, Christopher Dickey.
Well, yeah, that's surprising, I guess, when a lot of young people turn out to vote. But I think a lot of them were turning out for Jeremy Corbyn. I think the same kinds of people were turning out for Corbyn that had turned out for Bernie Sanders, who was supporting Corbyn in the United States. And I think that there's this desire for change. You know, if you look even at the UKIP voters, a lot of them voted for Labour. Because
let's look at the makeup of the parliament. The Conservatives gaining 5.5 points in the popular vote, but Labour upping its total by 10 points. And that seems to be thanks to the collapse of UKIP, whose share of the vote drops to just 2%, Christopher.
Yeah, and I think no seats in Parliament. So it's who are these UKIP voters? They are people who want to throw a wrench into the system, who want to say that the system as it isn't representing them, isn't answering their needs. They don't really know who will answer their needs, but they want somebody who's really going to shake things up. It's kind of what we saw in the United States with Trump voters or with Bernie Sanders voters, but particularly this group around UKIP. You know, it's not an ideological thing. It's a throw the rascals out thing.
Throw the rascals out thing. And Jeremy Corbyn, who started the campaign as a laughingstock, ran a strong campaign and managed to win over both Remainers from his party in the south and Brexiteers in the north.
Our manifesto for the many, not the few. And I'm very proud of the results that are coming in all over the country tonight of people voting for hope for the future and turning their backs on austerity.
People voting for hope. And this is interesting because there was this feeling when we were listening to the election results returns overnight that Theresa May wasn't the candidate of hope.
Well, I think there was a swell of support. There are some indications that of a swell of support amongst young people against the Brexit position of the government. There seemed to be a lot of young people who maybe didn't vote in the referendum.
So this is revenge of the Remainers.
To some extent, there is this attitude, I think, that you were talking about, of people just trying to throw a wrench into the system. But I think young people in the UK overwhelmingly voted against Brexit, and I think that there are a lot of young people, though, didn't actually come out to vote at all. So when you had more of those people being drawn in, that kind of changed the Brexit. I think Brexit played a role there.
Yeah, the only problem is that the Liberal Democrats ran against Brexit, and they didn't do anything in this election.
You know, I got a sense of Jeremy Corbyn's popularity in Manchester. I mean, it's a northern city. It is a Labour stronghold. But the day after the attacks, I was in the town hall, surrounded by these primarily South kids of Pakistani origin, and Corbyn was at the ceremony. Theresa May wasn't. His support was just overwhelming among the youth. And at the end of the speech, they were all screaming, "Where's May? Where's May?" I think even, the fact that this campaign was supposed to be the Brexit campaign, but then you had two deadly attacks, Manchester and London. And Corbyn's message was consistent, which was, cuts are not going to help. And particularly since Theresa May was the Home Secretary or the Interior Minister, the fact that these attacks happened, she really couldn't play the classic conservative or, center-right card of we are strong on security. She had no grounds for that. And so Corbyn, even when it came to security, amazingly, Labour, got the benefit of that issue as well.
And that harks back to what you said at the outset, which is here's Jeremy Corbyn. He shows up at that debate night. Theresa May doesn't. He mixes that up, mingles with the crowd. It always seemed very scripted and careful.
And there's also a refusal to buy the fear message. I think, people who say, you are trying to tell us, scare us, saying Corbyn can't run the country, saying he can't handle the Brexit negotiations. Well, don't tell us what to think. Don't tell us what to do.
And there's something about Theresa May that seemed just fundamentally undemocratic. I mean, she took the country to the snap poll because she claims that she wanted a clear mandate. She didn't want too much bickering, but that's the role of the opposition, to make it difficult. And then on the campaign trail, she did not seem to want to engage in any sort of discourse. It seemed so high-handed.
No, but I think, Mark, we were talking before the show, and Mark made an important point about, I think one of the reasons she wanted a big mandate was to sort of marginalize people in her own party who were very hard-line Brexiteers. If she had brought in a lot of new Tories into the parliament, she could have pushed those people aside a bit. That's pretty much what she was saying.
And I think that's really the important point of what's happened since yesterday. She wanted to come into this with a stronger hand to go into negotiations with Brussels, and she's come out with a much weaker hand. Now she has a precarious government that, it might carry on 2 weeks, it might carry on 6 months, who knows, but it's going to be on a knife edge the whole time, and she's going to be very constrained.
Although on the question of Brexit, it seems like this vote seems to be in favour of a soft Brexit and not a hard Brexit.
Yeah, because now we're discovering the name of Arlene Foster.
Yes.
She's the head of the DUP, the Ulster Unionist. Hard on social values, but soft on Brexit.
Democracy is a blunt instrument, and you can't say, it means this for Brexit precisely. Well, you can see what the results mean, but you can't say what the message, the precise message from voters is. So I would be careful of drawing the conclusion about where this is going to lead us in terms of Brexit. Those 40 or so MPs, 40 to 50 hardcore Brexit, that want a hard Brexit MPs in the Tory party, are going to be there and be on top of May and the government and try to drive their own agenda. The question is, how hard will they drive that, and how much willingness they will have to compromise with the DUP.
And the DUP, which at any time can withdraw that support.
Well, if you're going to have a hard Brexit, is that going to mean you're going to close the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland? Well, if that's the case, then the DUP is going to bail out of this coalition. So those are the kinds of issues that are going to come up.
Reactions out of Brussels, we were talking about it with our correspondent. A mix of anxiety. We heard the commissioner in charge of budget, he's German, Mr. Oettinger, tell German radio this morning that he says this adds new uncertainty. and also a little bit of smugness, because there is this sense that Brussels now has the upper hand.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of Schadenfreude going on here from the Germans. I think it remains to be seen, though, how this is going to play out. I think the trade-off has always been free movement or giving up free movement or maintaining access to the single market, and that dynamic probably I don't think that's shifted at all. Certainly, the EU position. They're going to be very firm. That's always going to be a trade-off that the UK has to decide for itself what it wants more of: free movement of labor or access to the single market.
I mean, Jean-Claude Juncker, the head of the European Commission, basically said, "Bring it on. Let's start these negotiations. Why are we waiting? Let's not wait any longer." There's this sense that really the Europeans, the European Union, or the United Europe group, is in the catbird seat right now.
Getting back to what you were saying about your reporting from Manchester, did you sense that the attacks, first in Manchester, then in London, were in a way a turning point, or this hope versus despair theme was already playing out?
I would say it was a turning point. Like in a lot of cities that has an attack, the rallying around the flag moment happened. And I don't know, in the face of this kind of threat, the public reaction has always been, well, there is this threat, but what do? We carry on. And, these kind of negative messages of fear are not cutting it that much anymore, because this continent has become, I mean, sorry to say, we're used to it, and we're sort of now in the stage of like, so now what are we going to do about it? Nobody is awed, really frightened by what's happening. They're in a much more pragmatic phase of handling this issue.
And she mentioned Islamist extremism in her speech after going to Buckingham Palace, long before she ever mentioned Brexit, Theresa May.
Well, I think she thinks that may be a strong suit for her, the fight against terrorism and Islamic extremism. But for the reasons that we've already talked about, the fact that she was Home Secretary for, 6 years, and she's the one who was supposed to make Britain safe, and now it is certifiably not so safe. So she says the problem is, and she said this before, a couple of days ago, right after the attack in London, she says the problem is the failure to integrate Muslims into British society, the idea that everybody's living in these separate ghettoized communities, which may be partly true. But that's not going to be reversed anytime soon. And the attempts to try and change that are only going to increase the volatility in British society. So it isn't clear what her real recommendations are, and it starts to sound like racism and scapegoating.
And the other problem here is that her critics might actually have a point that championing budget cuts and austerity under the Tory governments of the past, one could argue that has made the UK more vulnerable.
Corbyn ran a strong campaign and seemed to carry that hope versus despair theme. The Daily Mail, though, sees otherwise. It ran 14 pages of Corbyn bashing. This was on Wednesday. Most of the tabloid press against the Labour leader, and yet we've seen the result that we've seen. Does this mean that the all-powerful British tabloids are losing their luster, Matthew?
Well, I think many people know that the readership of these tabloids is getting older. Younger readers tend not to read them, and that may be an indication of, so the older readers, the people who are reading these, they're going to be voting Tory anyway. The younger readers are not reading them, and as the younger readers become more prominent, they're not going to be swayed by that.
My colleagues at Bloomberg View have a story out today saying that one of the losers of the British campaign is the press, and the tabloid press in particular. There was a story out, people have heard about it, about Rupert Murdoch banging his hands on the table in frustration when he found out about the result. So I think that's fair to say.
And the tabloid press has, according to many, become more caustic in the past year than it ever was in the past.
Perhaps that's turned people off. I don't know. I would be careful on the notion that Corbyn ran a strong campaign. He didn't make mistakes. If you look into what you read, you know, I think the reviews of his performance were actually mixed. But when your opponent is making errors, just let your opponent continue, and that's the
final point on all this. We have seen a splintering of politics all around. Yet one of the surprising things about this vote is suddenly we're back to virtually a two-party system in Britain.
For now. But it wouldn't surprise me to see a movement arise in Britain where people, because you've seen in Britain that there was this movement toward the extremes. The Tories got farther and farther to the right. Certainly Corbyn's very far to the left. There is middle ground open. But the problem is that the Liberal Democrats are not a very credible party. They feel old. They feel out of tune. If you had something like En Marche here in France, where you have somebody come in more or less from the outside and mobilize the center, that could be a very different story. But right now we don't see anybody like that.
And we'll talk about France when we come back. You may not know it. There are legislative elections coming up this weekend in this country. Stay with us.